this time. I think the more focused you can be in these sessions, the more you'll get out of each of them, because they're going to be content packed. They're short. They're 10 and 15-minute sessions for most of them. So they're going to be powerhouse. So maybe try and switch off all the distractions and be here with us. Then we're ready to basically kick things off. So then, as a first port of call, a good friend of mine, Tanya, is here with us today. Tanya, are you online? Will you mind popping on your screen if you're able to?
Hello, how are you?
Hey, welcome, Tanya. It's so great to have you.
No, it's great to be here.
Good. So, guys, we're very privileged to have Tanya speak with us today. She's the very, very busy CEO of the South African Venture Capital and Private Equity Association. So, she basically runs the industry from a South African and pretty much African perspective, if I may say so. So we're really keen to start this day with the state of the venture capital industry, in the country, on the continent, and in the world. Like, some of those views would be really, really cool to hear. But Tanya's specifically going to chat to us about the African perspective, and I'd love to hear how 2020 has influenced all of that. So then, without further ado, from my side, I'm going to hand over to our first expert, Tanya. We're so stoked to have you, and good luck for the session.
Thank you, Lo, and thank you to your team as well for trusting me to be the first speaker this afternoon. It's actually a wonderful honor, so thank you for that. I've prepared a few slides, but I don't want to do death by PowerPoint, but I do think it's important to use a few slides just to bring the points across, especially because I'm going to speak a little bit about some of the data in Africa. In terms of the actual, what the numbers look like. So there isn't a concrete answer as to how big is the VC industry in Africa. There's various reports that are being published. SAFCA does an annual survey mainly for South Africa early stage investors. But Africa also recently did a survey. They looked at 2014 to 2019 over a 5-year window, and estimated that about $400 million dollars were invested in early stage investments or by VCs. Then Partech also does an annual survey, a really good survey. But with their survey, they actually only look at technical or tech companies. So where AFCA and SAFCA may also look at other kinds of industries that are being invested in, Partech is purely tech investments. And for them, they recorded 66 investments in 2019, valued just over $200 million. So although we don't have a picture of exactly what the industry looks like, what we do have is a view on that the industry is growing. So VC in Africa is growing, and I think that is what everyone can agree on, regardless of who's doing the report. But how do we stack up if we look at the different countries, continent that are known for VC? And what we see is that 2018, South Africa still played a prominent role in venture capital penetration on the continent. Yet in 2019, Nigeria and Kenya leapfrogged South Africa in terms of VC investments and transactions. And there's a bigger portion of their GDP that are going into VC investments in those countries. So not only are we competing for capital amongst each other, we're also competing for capital across the continent with entrepreneurs across Africa, not only in South Africa. What I wanted to show you is the top 10 deals according to WeTracker for 2019. And as you can see, 5 out of the top 10 are fintech. So we're seeing a lot of fintech happening on the continent, some health tech, some logistics, etc. But we can see the size of the checks vary exponentially in terms of the check sizes that are being written, who's writing them. You can see there are some local VC fund managers in there, international VC fund managers, some corporates, and today you'll speak about the role that corporates play. But as you can see, it's a very competitive industry in terms of getting VC money. It just seems like there's a lot more deals chasing not enough VC money at the moment. Just to put it into perspective, a lot of times Africa VC and South African VC are criticized for not investing enough or not doing enough. But what I wanted to show you here on the left is this. This is from the PwC CB Insights report. And what they show is this is just 2018 Q1 deals. So we don't have the latest. But just in San Francisco, the North Bay area, just in Q1, $6.3 million were invested. And if you count that with Silicon Valley, which is number 3 in the South Bay area, just those two alone are almost bigger than what we see happening in a country on the African continent in a year. This is just to give you a little bit of a perspective. The VC industry in Africa is not VC in the US yet. We're far behind, we're still nascent, we're young, we're growing, but we're not there yet. The first VC transactions took place in the early 1970s when semiconductors were founded. And universities like Stanford played a huge role in developing the VC ecosystem in Silicon Valley. But in Africa, what we find is that there's not enough fund managers with big enough funds and a long-standing track record to invest in our entrepreneurship ecosystem. So what do we need? We need more VC fund managers with bigger fund sizes, and we need to give them time to build up a track record. In South Africa, our VC industry is nearly 15 years old. So we still have a lot of work to do and a lot of catch up to do to the more developed markets where VC has been a staple for more than 30 years. In terms of what we see from a funding gap perspective, there are definitely funding gaps in the value chain, specifically in the seed early stage funding. When someone or an entrepreneur comes up with an idea, there's not a lot of money available for that. Then there's some angel funding money available, and then your VC fund managers start to invest. Traditionally, the VC fund managers that were born and bred on the continent will invest in what we call a round or Series A, Series B, the first and second round of funding. But we do not have enough fund managers to co-invest or to invest in multiple rounds. So you'll see as an entrepreneur, as you start growing, you might find it more and more difficult to get local VCs that can invest when you are in Series C, D, etc. And that's where a lot of entrepreneurs then go overseas and try to find capital. There's also a lack of institutional investors that invest in VC funds. Just like an entrepreneur needs to go and fundraise, the same thing happens with a VC fund manager. They also need to fundraise. They also need to get others to believe in their fund strategy and their mandate, to give them their money, trust them with their money for investment, and that ultimately will get some form of returns. So what we're seeing in terms of who's investing in the VC industry, it's mainly high net worth individuals, family offices, other entrepreneurs that have made a success, that reinvest in the funds that have invested in them. Some entrepreneurs have started their own funds, but we hardly see any institutional money investing into local VC fund managers. In South Africa, for example, the biggest or only institutional investors that are investing in VC fund managers is the SA SME Fund. They've sort of laid the foundation for others to follow, but we lack institutional investors on the continent. A fragmented ecosystem, so many people are doing so many things. We've got incubators, accelerators, we've got VC fund managers, angel networks, we've got grant funding from governments, that there's so many pieces of the puzzle and everyone is trying to do the same thing, but we sometimes speak over each other. And there's opportunities for efficiencies and actually working together and more partnership. And then regulatory policy and restrictions. Each country has different regulatory policies or restrictions or opportunities for founders and entrepreneurs, and it differs from country to country. What I quickly just want to talk to you about is the regulatory hurdles. What we can see here is a timeline that I4Policy has done for us when they did some research done for the African continent. And in terms of small business acts and startup acts, Ghana was at the forefront of establishing a small business act in the 1980s. The US's Small Business Act was in 1957, so they're even ahead of the curve in that regard. South Africa's Small Business Act came in 1995, same with Zambia, and a few other African countries followed. In terms of a Startup Act, Tunisia was the first one on the continent to do so, followed by Senegal and Mali, and there's 3 or 4 others that are currently working on Startup Acts or establishing Startup Acts. And the kinds of things that they address in Startup Acts based on the research from I4Policy are these 7 areas of policy reform with 36 sub-challenges that they've identified. So they believe if countries address these 7 areas in their policies and startup acts, it will be a more conducive environment for entrepreneurship to thrive in. Just out of interest, SAFCA and a consortium of various players are working together to actually do this for South Africa, form an SA Startup Act. So what are the trends? What trends are we seeing? We're seeing VCs growing, although we can't agree on the numbers, and some deals are disclosed and others aren't. But local VCs are growing, as well as international VC interest on the continent. By those top 10 transactions we saw from 2019, you can see that there's a lot of international interest into African entrepreneurs. We're seeing more development finance institutions taking an interest in VC. We've seen FMO, IFC, Proparco, a few have indicated their interest to invest in the VC ecosystems on the African continent. However, it must link to their mandate. So if it doesn't link to their mandate, they won't necessarily invest. So their mandate might be financial inclusion, it might be a gender lens perspective. So depending on their mandate is whether they invest or not. And they tend to invest in fund managers that have a pan-African investment strategy. So they won't hardly invest in VCs that have a one country focus. We're also seeing more corporate VC, and you're going to talk about this a little bit later in the panel. We're seeing a lot more interest in corporates investing in VC, either as part of, as a substitute to their R&D budgets, looking at investing in entrepreneurs that are coming up with great innovations that they can tie into their business operations and products and services, or it's a corporate VC arm that have been established with similar to what you would find as an independent VC fund manager. And then here is a pic of one of our board members and someone that frequently writes and comments in the VC sector in South Africa, Keert van Zyl. For him, he says, rather than chasing the unicorn, we must nurture the gazelles. So the gazelles are those companies that show 20% plus return year on year. And he says for VCs and for African entrepreneurs to succeed, rather than chasing that one unicorn that may or may not happen, let's rather support a lot of gazelles that can create growth and economic opportunities and jobs within the countries that we invest in. Lo, that's it from my side. That was my quick 15 minutes. I hope I've shared something that that the audience can use and some food for thought as you go into the rest of the session.
That's perfect. Tanya, thank you so much for being here with us today. Really, really appreciate it. It's always exciting to see how the ecosystem is evolving here on the continent. And thank you for the great work you guys are doing at SAFCA to help push that agenda. We're really excited about the next couple of years over here.
Thank you, Lo. It's my pleasure, and good luck for the rest of the day.
Thanks so much. All the best.
Hey, Lo here, one of the founders of Outsource CFO. If you enjoyed this video, make it official. Click subscribe.